An old Mustang sped down the highway, its headlights slicing through the thick darkness. Inside, a young couple, Jake and Lisa, sang along to the radio, their laughter echoing in the quiet night. But tonight, the familiar road held something sinister. The air grew heavy, the laughter died down, and an unsettling silence fell over them. Jake, feeling a shiver run down his spine, turned down the radio, his eyes scanning the roadside. Lisa, sensing his unease, placed a comforting hand on his shoulder. "What's wrong?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "Nothing, just a weird feeling," Jake replied, forcing a smile. As they drove deeper into the night, a thick fog began to descend, shrouding the road ahead. Lost in the thick fog, their GPS died, amplifying their sense of dread. Jake cursed under his breath, pulling over to the side of the road. "We need to find a way out of this fog," Lisa said, her voice trembling slightly. Jake scanned their surroundings, his eyes falling on a barely visible dirt road leading into the woods. "Maybe we can find a house or something," he said, pointing down the deserted path. As they turned onto the dirt road, the trees seemed to close in around them, their branches reaching out like skeletal fingers. "Did you see that?" Lisa gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Jake, his heart pounding in his chest, tried to sound calm. "See what?" "It's just the fog playing tricks on us," he said, though his voice lacked conviction. Suddenly a figure emerged from the fog, standing motionless in the middle of the road. Jake slammed on the brakes, the car skidding to a halt a few feet from the dark figure. Lisa screamed, burying her face in her hands. The figure remained still, an aura of menace radiating from it, sending chills down their spines. Then, as quickly as it had appeared, the figure turned and melted back into the fog, leaving Jake and Lisa paralyzed with fear. "We need to get out of here," Jake said, his voice hoarse with terror. As they tried to turn the car around, the engine sputtered and died, plunging them into darkness. The fog pressed in around them, making the night even more ominous. Jake tried the ignition again and again, but the engine only coughed and wheezed in response. Each turn of the key chipped away at his hope. "No, no, no," he muttered, hitting the steering wheel in frustration. His hands trembled with helplessness. They were trapped alone with something unknown lurking in the fog. Panic seized Lisa, her breaths becoming shallow and rapid. "What are we going to do?" she cried, her voice shrill with fear. Tears streamed down her face. Jake, struggling to maintain some semblance of control, took a deep breath. He knew panicking wouldn't help. "It's okay. We'll figure something out," he said, though his words did little to soothe his own racing heart. He had to be strong for Lisa. He stepped out of the car, the cold, damp air enveloping him like a shroud. The fog was so thick he could taste it. It was so dense he could barely see an arm's length in front of him. He felt lost in this milky sea. As he tried to call for help, he felt a cold dread creep up his spine. His voice echoed back at him, unanswered. In the dim reflection of the rearview mirror, a pair of glowing eyes materialized from the fog, slowly approaching, like something sinister and inevitable. Fear, primal and raw, gripped Jake's heart, freezing his limbs and making his heart pound against his ribs. He didn't dare turn around, afraid of what he might see, his mind conjuring up terrifying images. "Get out, Lisa, run!" he hissed, his voice a strained whisper, laced with panic and desperation. Lisa, her eyes wide with terror, scrambled out of the car, her hand instinctively reaching for Jake, feeling his trembling hand grasp hers. Together, they stumbled back the way they came, their eyes glued to the approaching menace, their hearts pounding in unison. The eyes drew closer, their glow illuminating the fog with an eerie, unnatural light that seemed to pulse with a life of its own. Jake could now feel the creature's presence, cold and menacing, closing in on them like a shadow about to engulf them. As they ran, branches snagged at their clothes, thorns scratched at their skin, but they didn't dare slow down, fear lending speed to their flight. The sound of their own ragged breathing and pounding hearts filled the quiet night, a constant reminder that they were still alive. Through the swirling fog, Jake saw the faint outline of their car. "Almost there!" he gasped, pulling Lisa along with renewed urgency. Her hand, clammy and cold, tightened around his. He prayed they would make it, prayed that whatever was hunting them wouldn't catch them. They stumbled and fell, their bodies hitting the wet ground with a thud. Pain shot up Jake's ankle, but he couldn't stop. Not now. He scrambled to his feet, hauling Lisa up with him. She was crying now, her sobs lost in the oppressive silence of the woods. They reached the car, their chests heaving, lungs burning. Jake fumbled with the keys, his fingers numb with terror. As Jake slid into the driver's seat, the creature lunged, its claws raking against the metal of the car door. He slammed the door shut, locking it just as the creature slammed into the window. The glass cracked, but held. Jake threw the car into gear and floored it. The engine roared and they shot forward, tires spitting gravel. He didn't dare look back, his entire being focused on escape. As they emerged from the fog-choked forest and back onto the highway, the creature was gone. The road stretched before them, empty and silent. Lisa buried her face in her hands, her body racked with sobs. Jake pulled her close, holding her tight. He held her close, trying to soothe her trembling with the warmth of his embrace. They were safe now, at least for the moment. But the horror of what they had experienced lingered, a cold knot of fear in their stomachs. As the adrenaline faded, exhaustion washed over them. Their bodies ached, their minds numb from the events of the night. Jake started the car and pulled back onto the highway. He didn't know where they were going. He just knew they couldn't stay here. The forest held too many dark memories. Hours later, they pulled into a gas station, their bodies and spirits weary. The long drive had taken its toll, and they needed a break. As Jake filled the tank, he noticed Lisa staring at something in the bed of a pickup truck. Her gaze was fixed, as if she were looking at something unbelievable. She was pale, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and fascination. Jake had never seen her so spooked. He followed her gaze, his heart skipping a beat when he saw it. A single, glowing feather, faintly shimmering in the early morning light. It looked otherworldly. He reached out to touch it, but Lisa stopped him, her hand on his arm. Her touch was firm, yet gentle. "Don't," she whispered, her voice trembling. There was a warning in her tone. "It's beautiful, but it's not ours. It's something else, and we shouldn't interfere. It's a reminder of what we ran from, of what's still out there. We can't afford to forget." As they drove away, leaving the feather behind, Jake glanced at the rear-view mirror. He had a feeling this wasn't the end of their story. For a fleeting moment, he thought he saw a pair of glowing eyes watching them from the trees, a warning that their journey was far from over.